Hi, today I wanted to talk to you about paperwork. Now, if you're using an electronic medical record such as Theranos or Simple Practice or Therapy Notes, they have most of the forms embedded in the system, and you can usually customize them, and sometimes you can actually put your logo on them and your address and things like that. If you're not using an electronic record, I really recommend that you have these forms ready to go, and before we used electronic record, we put them all in a PDF and sent them to the client, and then the client could send them back to us. So what kinds of forms do you need? Well, the first form that I have in my packet is I have a welcome letter. And the welcome letter is just an introduction to the practice. It confirms their appointment time. It confirms our address, who their therapist is going to be. Also, it gives really clear instructions of how to get to our office, where to park, those kinds of things. Additionally, I put my personal cell phone on that letter. Now, I know some of you are going, no, don't do that. But in all the time that we've been doing this, I've only got 3 people who have ever called me. And the reason that I wanted them to have my personal cell number is if they have a problem or concern, I want them to call me right away so that we can resolve it. And again, we've had thousands of clients that come through our office, and only 3 in the 10 years or so that we've been doing this have I ever gotten a call. And those particular calls are really important, and I was able to handle it. So I have that in my welcome letter. The next one that I have is an intake form, and the intake form collects demographic information. So it has the full name, date of birth, address, phone number, email, preferred method of contact, emergency contact, and some other things. We also want them to bring out any medical or physical concerns that we have, and so that asks some of those questions in that paperwork packet, in that intake form. The next thing we have in there is the informed consent. The informed consent is the form that explains treatment. It explains the process of treatment and the benefits and alternatives to therapy. It also lists our fees, our insurance, how to have a complaint addressed, who to contact in our licensing board. And each state has a particular specifics for what their informed consent or their consent to treat is needing to have. So make sure that you look at your particular state's regulations on that. The fourth form I have in my packet is I have a HIPAA policy packet, and it has all of the information. It has a sign-off sheet so that they are telling us that yes, they got the HIPAA information, they know how we're going to handle protected health information and who we can direct it to or release information to, and how they would be able to look at their health record. The fifth form we have in there is the media policy. So we have a media policy, social media policy. We won't friend our clients, or we won't seek them out or stalk them. But we also have, in our media policy, we have our telephone or text information. What will we do with our text information or email? And we really try very hard not to use either text or email for any clinical data, clinical information. Now, we do telehealth, but that's through a HIPAA compliant platform. So we explain to the client that these particular forms of communication are not HIPAA compliant, and that they need to know that if they're going to text, and so that we really don't want them to text us unless they're telling us they're going to be a little bit late or something like that. We do use a HIPAA compliant email, and we have that in our system that's already built in. Our electronic record allows them to go in and return their forms through a HIPAA compliant portal. We also have a court policy. Now, you should have a court policy in your documents. The documents would list what your fees are, how you handle subpoenas, how you what you'll write in a letter or what you won't write in a letter. You need to have that court policy in there because you need to get paid for the time if you're being called to court. We have our court policy at a higher fee rate than we would normally charge, so that they think a little more about it before they pull us off a bunch of other clients and make us go to court. So we have a full day and we have a half day, and we will not sit in court on call. We will take the whole day. So we've had a lot of people who've said, well, I want to subpoena you, and we're like, okay, but here's our policy, and you signed it at the beginning of our case. If you need a court policy, there's a cut and paste one. Nicole Stoller-Peterson has one in Therapy Court Prep, and I'll have that link in the bottom here. The next information form that we have is a credit card authorization. We keep a signed release that we can charge their credit card for their co-pays or their therapy, and we have the signature on file at all times. The next one was either a pay receipt or a super bill, depending on what they need. If they're just needing a receipt for their copay, we just do a real quick receipt for that. But if they need a super bill so that they can turn it into their insurance company, then we give them a super bill, which is a little bit different than just a straight receipt. But those are the same kinds of things. The next thing that we have that we're using is we have an intake form, a progress note form, a treatment plan, a secondary contact form, and those we all keep in the case file, and as things happen in the case, then we are able to go back and look at it or look at the plans, but we need all those progress notes, and I'm sure you're already doing those pieces anyway. And the last form that we have is the 12 to 18. If you see teens, you need a particular, at least in California, you need a particular form that talks about confidentiality in emergency situations, and it breaks it down. So those are the forms that we use. Now, they're not all forms that you would need to have. Like we have an excused letter form, we have a doctor's referral form, those kinds of things. We try to brand everything so that it has our information on it, our contact information, our phone numbers, really clear to see. And we make sure that we are getting copies to our clients. If they use our portal, they can easily download their own copies, so we don't have to copy and paste for them. And you may want additional things every year to put in there, depending on what you're doing and how your practice is developing. And so as you grow, you may need a student consent form, or you may need some other kinds of forms in there. I do recommend, though, that you put it on your calendar to check the forms, make sure that they are updated every year, and make sure that you can have the latest laws available to you and your clients. Well, those are the 10 forms that I think you should have. If you just don't want to create forms or it feels too overwhelming, I also have a paperwork packet on my website. I'll put the link in there, and I actually give you 16 forms in there to get you started, and they're very customizable. It takes you about 30 minutes. So please do think about forms. It's a very important regulation piece that we need to follow, and if you can get that into procedures right as you're beginning and starting your practice, it'll make things go a lot smoother. All right, take care.